Welcome to my channel. It began in a remote corner of Earth, where endless wheat fields rolled beneath pale morning light. To the villagers, he was just another quiet farmer. Hands rough, face weathered, clothes simple and torn. His name was Elias Ward, a man who never raised his voice and never spoke of his past. He lived alone, tending his crops and repairing old machines, but every night when the stars burned above, he would stare at them with an intensity that didn't belong to a farmer. Rumors whispered that strange lights were sometimes seen in his barn, soft pulses of blue energy that faded when anyone came close. Most laughed it off. But one evening, when a fleet of alien raiders descended from the clouds, ships that screamed like thunder and weapons that melted stone, Elias didn't run. He simply looked up, his eyes cold and unafraid. The villagers fled, soldiers scrambled, and in the chaos, the quiet man walked to his shed, opened a rusted trunk, and drew something that shimmered with power older than Earth itself. The blade sang as he grasped it, a sound not made by steel, but by something alive. Elias had not always been a farmer. Long before he came to this quiet world, he was part of a forgotten human division known as the Vanguard soldiers who vanished after the First Contact Wars. The Galactic Council believed them destroyed, wiped out by their own rebellion. But Elias survived, carrying with him a relic, an artifact humanity had unearthed beneath the ruins of Mars. The aliens called it the Echo Blade, a weapon that resonated with human willpower and turned emotion into energy. He buried it, swearing never to use it again. Yet now, as alien raiders unleashed plasma fire upon his land, the air trembled with his decision. The ground cracked when he swung it once, the kind of swing that split the clouds apart and sent shockwaves through the sky. The aliens had come for resources, thinking humans were primitive, unarmed, and scattered. What they found was something else entirely, a man whose fury could awaken a weapon from legend. Humanity, the galaxy had said, was finished. Elias Ward was about to remind them why that was a lie. The alien commander, a creature of glassy skin and burning eyes, watched in disbelief as his ships fell from the air. His translators screamed through static, calling for reinforcements, but every beam of plasma that struck Elias vanished in a flash of light. The blade was alive, feeding on the assault, growing brighter with every strike. Around him, the wheat fields ignited in golden fire, reflecting the glow of human defiance. Drones swarmed, clawing through the smoke, yet every one was cut down by arcs of light that left the soil molten. Elias didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like something beyond human, driven by the memory of what humanity once was, the explorers who stood against gods and refused to kneel. The villagers watched from a distance, their fear turning into awe. This wasn't a man defending his farm. This was a remnant of Earth's lost warriors, a ghost of a civilization the galaxy had tried to erase. High above, the Galactic Council observed in secret. A probe had recorded everything, the destruction of an elite alien raiding party by one human with a blade that should not exist. Council members debated in panic. How can a primitive world possess that weapon? Hissed the VOR-ADH delegate. That relic was forbidden, said another. But the Terran signal still pulsed across the stars, a beacon of resistance that echoed through every listening station. He's alive, murmured a voice in the shadows. An old human admiral watching from a hidden fleet deep in the asteroid belt. Elias Ward's signal had been the code they were waiting for. Across the void, Terran ships, long silent and hidden, began to wake from cold storage. Humanity had not vanished. It had been preparing. When the next fleet arrived, it wasn't just raiders, it was a council task force, sent to cleanse the planet before word spread. The sky darkened with ships, each bristling with weapons that had once conquered empires. But Elias stood calmly at the edge of his field, the blade humming softly, its light now calm and deep. "You forgot who we are," he whispered. When the first orbital beam fired, it met a wall of energy that split the atmosphere. The counterattack wasn't technological, it was willpower, human rage shaped into sound and fury. Across the galaxy, alien commanders whispered the same fear. The humans were back. From hidden colonies, sleeper agents, and forgotten fleets, humanity began to move. Every planet that had mocked Earth's silence now watched in dread as Terran warships cut through space with unstoppable precision. The Council demanded surrender. Humanity answered with silence and then fire. When the smoke cleared, the invaders were gone. The fields were scorched, but the Earth still stood. Elias dropped to his knees, the blade dimming as it returned to silence. He wasn't a hero, he was a warning. The Galactic Council convened in fear, arguing over treaties and sanctions, but none dared approach Earth again. Word spread through the stars. One man with a blade defeated a fleet. The legend grew, carried by smugglers, traders, and frightened ambassadors. Some said he vanished into the mountains, others that he rejoined the Terran fleet now reborn. But for those who saw him that day, one truth remained. The quiet farmer had shown the galaxy what humanity truly was. Not conquerors, not victims, but survivors who could turn even grief into power. And somewhere beyond the stars, the blade waited once more, humming in the dark, ready for the next time humanity was forgotten. Long before Elias Ward became a quiet farmer, before the calluses on his hands and the dirt beneath his nails, he had walked among soldiers and stars. He was one of the Vanguard, the last defenders of humanity during the Collapse War, a conflict so devastating that even the Galactic Council erased it from their archives. The Council claimed victory, but the truth was darker. The humans didn't surrender, they vanished. Some said they fled into deep space, others that they destroyed themselves to deny their enemies the spoils. Only a few survivors remained, scattered across forgotten colonies, blending into quiet lives. Elias was one of them. The blade he carried, now resting in his calloused hand, wasn't forged on Earth. It was found beneath the red dust of Mars in a buried chamber older than any known civilization. The scientists who studied it vanished, their instruments melted, their minds burned by what they called the resonance. It was said the blade responded not to muscle or strength, but to the human soul itself, the emotions that defined them: love, grief, defiance, hope. It was called the Echo Blade, a weapon that turned the wielder's will into raw energy. And Elias had sworn never to use it again after it consumed his entire platoon on the last day of the war. He had buried it deep beneath the soil of his new home, vowing to live as a farmer, far from battlefields and blood. For 20 quiet years, he kept that promise. Seasons passed, the world grew smaller, and the stars above became just lights he never wished to see up close again. But peace never lasts. When the alien raiders descended, tearing through the clouds with fire and thunder, it wasn't random. The insignia on their ships bore the same mark Elias had seen on the Council fleet that bombarded Earth's outer colonies, the mark of the Draxian Dominion. He remembered their commander's voice echoing through broken comms decades ago, mocking the last stand of humankind. The harvest is complete. The humans are dust. Those words had haunted him through every sleepless night since. Now, as he stood on his farmland, that same insignia burned in the sky again, carved into the hulls of ships that thought Earth was defenseless. They were wrong. When the first plasma blast struck the fields, the world around him lit in orange and ash. His crops, his home, his peace, all were erased in seconds. But Elias didn't scream. He simply walked into the barn, opened the rusted chest buried beneath the floor, and pulled free the black case within. His fingers trembled not from fear, but from memory. The blade hummed faintly when he touched it, like it recognized him, whispering through metal and light. For years, he had ignored its silent call, but now it pulsed with urgency, as if it knew war had returned. The moment he unsheathed it, the air itself bent. The color drained from the world. He could feel its heartbeat merging with his own, the hum rising in pitch until the barn walls shook. Outside, alien troops landed in formation, laughing as they marched toward what they thought was an easy target. But as the smoke cleared, they saw him standing there. No armor, no exosuit, just a man in worn boots holding a weapon that glowed with impossible brilliance. The aliens raised their rifles, and Elias whispered, almost gently, "You shouldn't have come here." The first wave never made it past the fence. The blade moved like light itself, cutting through air, energy, and matter. Plasma bolts dissolved before reaching him, drawn into the weapon's core, feeding it. Each motion was a whisper of fury, each swing the echo of every human life lost to the Council's arrogance. The invaders panicked, their command channels filling with static and screams. One of them shouted, "Impossible! No life form registers this power." But the truth was simple. Elias wasn't using technology. He was channeling something only humans possessed, the will to fight for what was theirs. The ground split open, sending waves of burning soil toward the alien crafts. Drones fell from the sky, their sensors blinded by a surge of electromagnetic distortion. In that moment, the blade wasn't just an artifact. It was the voice of humanity itself, roaring through the cosmos after centuries of silence. When the last of the raiders retreated, their ships limping toward orbit, Elias stood in the ruins of his home, breathing hard. The field was gone, the barn in ashes, but the stars above seemed to burn brighter than ever. He looked down at the blade, its light fading softly, and whispered to the night, "You'll come again, won't you?" The wind answered with silence, but far above, in the cold halls of the Galactic Council, alarms began to sound. Energy readings from a small Terran farming colony had reached impossible levels. The same signature last recorded during the Collapse War had resurfaced on Earth. In that instant, the galaxy that had forgotten humanity began to remember, and Elias Ward, the man who just wanted peace, had once again become the spark that would ignite a storm. The night that followed burned itself into the memory of every living soul on that side of the continent. The alien fleet didn't retreat for long. They had come for conquest, and shame would not allow them to flee from a single man with a blade. When dawn broke, their ships blotted out the sun, sleek and black, shaped like knives hanging in the sky. Their engines howled across the heavens, sending shockwaves that flattened trees and rattled bones. The Draxian Dominion wasn't known for mercy, and now they came in force. From orbit, they unleashed sonic bombs that screamed through the air before bursting into waves of light, meant to disorient, to break will before striking flesh. But the man standing at the heart of the devastation did not move. Elias Ward stood still, his boots buried in cracked soil, his clothes torn and smeared with soot. The echo blade hovered beside him in silence, humming faintly like a heart ready to awaken. In their arrogance, the Draxians sent a broadcast before their next strike. A holographic image shimmered above the battlefield. A tall, silver-skinned commander with 4 burning eyes and a voice like grinding stone. "Human remnant," he hissed. "You wield forbidden power. Surrender it, and your death will be merciful." His tone was mockery. Elias lifted his head and met the hologram's gaze, and though the distance between them was thousands of meters, something ancient stirred in that quiet stare. "You think mercy belongs to you?" Elias murmured, his voice like the wind before a storm. Then he raised the blade and the world changed. The light that erupted from the weapon was not heat, nor fire, but something deeper, a resonance that pulsed through time itself. Every sensor aboard the alien ships screamed in protest, readings spiking beyond comprehension. The echo blade glowed white-hot, and when Elias swung it once, the sky tore open. The wave that followed wasn't an explosion, it was an awakening. Energy rippled outward, invisible and silent, and then reality itself began to fracture. The leading ship's hull folded inward as if crushed by unseen hands. Its metal screamed, shattering into molten fragments that fell like meteors across the farmland. The soldiers below froze, their armor systems failing, their comms dissolving into static. For the first time in centuries, the Draxians knew fear. Elias moved forward slowly, each step leaving scorched footprints in the dirt. Around him, the remnants of his home burned, but his gaze stayed fixed on the horizon where the next wave descended. Hundreds of alien drones poured from the sky, surrounding him in perfect formation, their plasma rifles glowing like blue suns. The commander, now watching through the viewports of his flagship, sneered. "End him," he ordered. The drones opened fire. What followed wasn't battle, it was annihilation. The shots vanished midair, consumed by the invisible field radiating from the blade. The energy fed it, transformed it, and with one motion Elias unleashed it back. A shockwave burst outward, brighter than lightning and louder than thunder. Every drone within a mile was torn apart mid-flight, their bodies reduced to glowing ash. For those watching from afar, it looked like a second sunrise had erupted from the ground. The villagers hiding in the hills could only stare, whispering prayers or curses, unsure whether they were witnessing salvation or the end of the world. One old man, trembling beside his daughter, whispered, "That's no weapon, that's judgment." High above, the alien fleet panicked. Communications broke down as ship after ship lost power. The energy that the humans once called the echo pulse was spreading, crawling through the atmosphere like a living storm. It reached satellites, weapons, even the orbiting command ship. The commander's console exploded in sparks as his crew shouted in terror. "Sir, containment fields are failing," one cried. "Our systems. They're responding to him." Elias raised the blade once more, pointing it at the heavens. A single word escaped his lips, soft yet final. "Enough!" What happened next defied every law of physics known to alien science. The clouds parted, revealing not sunlight but a shimmering ripple of aurora that stretched across the sky. The fleet above trembled as their gravitational anchors failed, sending entire cruisers spinning out of orbit. Elias wasn't striking them with energy. He was resonating with their cores, rewriting the vibration of their own engines until they collapsed into themselves. The first ship fell like a dying star, slamming into the far mountains in a blinding flash. The second detonated midair, scattering debris for miles. One by one, the invaders fell, their arrogance erased in minutes. And then silence. Smoke curled over the blackened earth, ashes drifting like snow. Elias stood alone amid the ruin, his breath heavy, the blade dimming in his hand. The soil beneath his boots still glowed faintly from the energy discharge. The villagers began to emerge slowly, their eyes wide with disbelief. Some dropped to their knees in awe. Others fled, convinced no human could possess such power. But Elias didn't look at them. He looked at the sky, where the last of the Draxian fleet limped away into the upper atmosphere, its engines sputtering. He knew this wasn't the end. The Dominion would return, and next time they would bring the entire council. Miles away, hidden satellites recorded everything. The Galactic Council's observers watched in silent horror as their screens displayed the unmistakable signature of the Echo Blade, a weapon they had declared extinct. Reports began to pour in across the galaxy. One human, one weapon, one act of defiance. On Council worlds, news of the event spread like wildfire. Alien delegates whispered in fear, remembering the old wars, the ones they swore never to speak of again. Some said it was a ghost, others claimed humanity had evolved. But deep down, they all knew the truth: humanity had never been destroyed. It had been waiting. As night fell again on the scorched fields, Elias sheathed the blade and looked toward the distant horizon. The echoes of war were calling once more, and though he had spent a lifetime running from them, he knew there was no turning back. In the reflection of his blade, he could see not his own face, but countless others, soldiers, colonists, dreamers, those who once believed humanity's light had gone out. It hadn't. It was still burning, quietly, fiercely, waiting to be seen. And tonight, across the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, the stars had seen it again. Far beyond Earth's atmosphere, in the cold vacuum between the stars, a transmission rippled through the void like a heartbeat. The energy signature from Elias Ward's battle was unlike anything recorded in centuries. It pierced every relay, bypassed every encryption field, and reached even the deep space observatories that had long gone silent. The Galactic Council, seated in their colossal citadel orbiting the world of Virilon Prime, detected it first. At first, the readings were dismissed as a sensor anomaly, a burst of planetary energy, maybe a geological event. But when the waveform stabilized, the chamber of delegates grew quiet. The signal pulsed in a rhythm only one species had ever used, a human distress code, old Terran military. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. So as the words hadn't been heard in the galaxy for over 200 years, and yet now, it echoed again, resonating through every channel with haunting clarity. The council chamber filled with voices, alien languages overlapping in confusion and fear. "Impossible," hissed the crystalline Xerax representative, his voice sharp as glass. "Earth is dead. Humanity was erased." The archivist caste murmured in disagreement. "No, not erased. They withdrew, and silence has meaning." The High Chancellor of the Council, a being of light and form known only as Vrail, demanded visual confirmation. When the footage appeared, the chamber fell still. On the holographic screen, smoke rolled across the surface of a blue-green world, and amid it stood a single human man. No armor, no army, just one figure holding a blade glowing with white fire. Around him lay the wreckage of ships that once belonged to the Draxian Dominion, reduced to molten ruins. And above the scene, the blade's energy crackled, forming a spectral halo that pulsed with the same ancient code. Humanity still breathes. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted accusations, demanding to know who armed the Terrans again, who broke the ancient accords forbidding human weaponry. But beneath the noise, a deeper fear settled. Because they all remembered the last war, the day the Terran Vanguard stood alone against the United Council fleets and almost won. Humanity's downfall hadn't been through defeat, but through withdrawal. They had chosen to disappear, taking their secrets and their fury into the void. And now, one man on one small farm had reignited that forgotten dread. Meanwhile, deep within the asteroid belt beyond Jupiter's orbit, something stirred. Hidden for decades, dormant Terran listening stations began to hum to life. Rusted satellites blinked, systems self-repairing as encrypted data packets transmitted through ancient channels. One by one, old AI cores awoke, ghosts of Earth's military past rebooting after centuries of silence. In a dark command room buried beneath the frozen rock of Ceres, an aging admiral stood before a flickering hologram. His name was Rear Admiral Isaac Thorne, last surviving officer of the Terran Vanguard fleet. His cybernetic eye flickered as he watched the transmission from Earth. His lips trembled, and then a slow, almost disbelieving smile crossed his face. "He did it," Thorne whispered. "After all these years, they found him." Behind him, the old Terran symbol, the blue Earth encircled by silver stars, glowed back to life. Across the control room, long silent consoles blinked green as deep space beacons reconnected. The voice of an ancient AI rumbled through the speakers. Terran signal restored. Humanity protocol reinstated. The Admiral turned to his officers, a handful of veterans and second-generation colonists who had grown up believing Earth was gone. "Prepare the fleet," Thorne ordered. "The Council will come for him. They always do. But this time we answer." Engines buried beneath asteroids ignited, and for the first time in 2 centuries, Terran warships stirred from slumber. Leviathan-class carriers and shadow fleets began to rise from darkness, powered by technology no alien had ever fully understood. Machines that responded not just to command, but to conviction. Back on Virilon Prime, the Council's panic deepened. Reports flooded in from border worlds. Unknown Terran signals, unregistered ships moving through dead sectors, colonies once thought abandoned flickering back online. The Chancellor struck his staff upon the marble floor, sending a ripple of silence through the chamber. "This cannot be allowed to spread," he commanded. "Dispatch a containment fleet to Sol immediately. Erase whatever remains before others begin to remember." A murmur passed through the chamber, some delegates hesitant, others bloodthirsty. "And if the humans retaliate?" asked one. The Chancellor's eyes dimmed. "Then they will meet the full force of the galaxy." But in the shadows of that great hall, one figure did not join the applause. It was Ambassador Lyra Vane, a half-human born from a long-forgotten experiment between species. She had spent her life hiding her heritage, but when she saw the image of Elias Ward standing amidst the wreckage, something stirred within her blood. "They're coming," she whispered. "And he's not alone." Word spread like wildfire through the undercurrents of space. Pirates whispered that the Terrans were back. Smugglers swore they saw ghost ships bearing the old Earth insignia in the Perseus arm. Even among the enslaved worlds, hope returned in whispers. the humans have awakened. Across galaxies, statues once built to commemorate humanity's defeat were quietly covered. The legend of the species that refused to die was no longer myth, it was fact. And on Earth, Elias felt it too. Standing in the ruins of his field, he looked to the sky as a faint tremor rolled through the atmosphere. The blade at his side pulsed once, faint but steady. He didn't know it yet, but his signal had become more than a cry for help. It had become a rallying call, one that would echo through the galaxy, awakening every sleeping remnant of a people once feared and forgotten. Humanity was stirring again, and this time, they would not kneel. The Council's fleet arrived 3 weeks later, descending on Earth like an eclipse. Hundreds of warships, sleek, enormous, and glimmering with alien precision, broke through orbit, their shadows blotting out the morning sun. Across the world, humans lifted their eyes in silence. News channels stuttered, satellites went dark, and in the quiet valleys where Elias once farmed, the wind carried only ash. The Draxian Dominion had returned, not as raiders this time, but as executioners sent by the Council itself. Their orders were clear: eliminate the anomaly. Erase all trace of the Echo Blade. From orbit, they scanned the charred remains of Elias's homestead, but found nothing. No body, no energy signature. Only silence, and a strange lingering pulse deep in the earth, faint but constant. The fleet commander, a cold and calculating creature named Elias, gave the order to commence planetary sterilization. But before the countdown could finish, something moved. It began as static through the command channels, at first soft, then deafening. Across their monitors, the feed distorted into flashes of light and sound. A single phrase cut through the interference, transmitted in the old Terran code. You came to bury us. You came too late. Then, every sensor in orbit registered movement. Hundreds of ships emerging from the far side of the moon, black and unmarked, moving with impossible speed. They weren't alien. They were Terran. The long silent fleet Admiral Thorne had reawakened now glided from shadow, engines burning with the same deep blue light humanity once wielded in its prime. The alien ships panicked, recalibrating weapons, but it was too late. The void around Earth shimmered as ancient Terran warships opened their hulls, revealing rail cannons and singularity drives that hadn't fired in centuries. The first shot split the sky. It wasn't a beam or missile. It was kinetic fury, pure and silent, moving faster than thought. It tore through a Draxian destroyer like paper, its remains scattering across the stratosphere. From orbit, the Terran flag once again shone on the sides of their ships, an ancient symbol long feared, long forgotten. A blue sphere encircled by silver rings. The message was clear. Humanity had returned. Admiral Thorne's voice thundered across open comms. For every world you burned, for every voice you silenced, Earth remembers. The fleet responded in unison, their engines roaring like gods awakened from slumber. Down below, Elias stood in the smoking ruins of his field, eyes raised to the heavens. The echo blade pulsed in his hand, brighter than ever, resonating with the energy of the Terran ships above. He could feel their presence. His brothers, his sisters in arms, those who had vanished into the stars and now returned to finish what had begun long ago. The air trembled as he drove the blade into the ground. The energy rippled outward, forming a dome of light that spread for miles, shielding the Earth beneath. When the Council fleet unleashed their orbital bombardment, the beams dissolved before touching the surface, drawn into the pulse of the Echo Blade. From the command deck of the alien flagship, Elias watched in disbelief. Impossible. He's channeling planetary defense through a relic, he shouted. But before he could issue another order, a human voice replied through his comms, cold, calm, and final. No, Commander. He's not channeling it. He is it. In the next instant, the flagship's core imploded, and the entire Draxian armada began to fall apart. Terran ships weaved through the chaos, their weapons precise, surgical, unstoppable. They didn't conquer, they reclaimed. Every blast, every maneuver carried the same message the galaxy had refused to understand. Humanity does not die quietly. On Virilon Prime, the Galactic Council watched the destruction unfold in horror. The Chancellor's voice quivered as he whispered, "We created this monster." Ambassador Lyra Vane stood apart from the panic, her eyes shining with something between pride and sorrow. "No," she said softly. "You just reminded them who they are." Reports came in from across the galaxy. Terran sleeper fleets awakening in dozens of systems. Colonies once thought lost suddenly reappearing on sensors. Humanity had never been gone. They had simply gone silent, waiting for the moment when silence would strike louder than war. As the last of the Council ships fled, the battle above Earth ended. The Terran fleet held position in orbit, their lights forming a constellation no one had seen in generations. Elias, his body weakened but his spirit unbroken, looked up as the echo blade dimmed. The wind returned, soft and cool, carrying the scent of soil and smoke. He whispered to the stars, "The harvest is done." The blade sank into the ground, sealing itself once more, its light fading into the earth like an ember going to sleep. Above, Admiral Thorn gave one final order to his fleet. "Stand down. The planet is safe." And as his voice faded, a transmission spread across every known frequency, simple and clear. "This is Earth. We are alive." The galaxy trembled. Worlds that once laughed at humanity now watched in silence, and those who once called them savages now whispered prayers in their name. The reckoning had come not through conquest but remembrance. Humanity had reminded the stars why they were feared, why they were respected, and why, even after centuries of darkness, their light could never be extinguished. The fires of war had quieted, leaving only the whispers of wind across the ruined plains. The skies over Earth were no longer filled with alien dreadships, but with the dark silhouettes of Terran vessels holding silent vigil. Smoke curled from the torn soil where the battle had raged, painting the horizon in hues of crimson and gold as the sun broke through the haze for the first time in weeks. Elias Ward stood alone amidst the ashes of his field, his body bruised, his clothes scorched, his breath shallow. The echo blade lay embedded in the earth before him, pulsing faintly with a soft, living light, like a heart slowing its beat after a storm. The world was quiet again, but it was not peace. It was aftermath, heavy and sacred. Humanity had survived, and in doing so, they had changed the balance of the galaxy forever. From orbit, Admiral Thorn watched the blue planet turning slowly beneath his ship's glass bridge. The Terran fleet, resurrected from silence and myth, now stood where no alien dared to linger. The Council's retreat had been absolute. No empire, no dominion, no race that had once mocked humankind dared to re-enter the Sol system. Across his comms, voices reported new transmissions from distant colonies. Outposts thought long destroyed now answering to the same call. Humanity restored. The Admiral closed his eyes, remembering the wars that broke them, the lies that buried them, and the centuries of exile that nearly erased their name from the stars. "We warned them once," he murmured, his voice heavy with the weight of history. "They mistook silence for surrender." His second-in-command, a young officer who had never seen Earth until today, stood beside him, her eyes glistening as she whispered, "What happens now?" Thorn turned his gaze toward the faint pulse on the planet's surface, the beacon of the echo blade still glowing in the soil. "Now," he said quietly, "we rebuild, and we remember." Down on the ground, Elias knelt beside the blade, his hand trembling as he traced its edge. He could feel it speaking, not in words, but in memories showing him faces long gone. His squad from the old Vanguard, the laughter of soldiers before their last battle, the voice of a woman calling his name across the ruins of Mars. The blade carried all of it, the grief, the fury, the hope, and for the first time Elias understood what it truly was. Not a weapon, but a reflection. It didn't grant power. It revealed it. The echo blade was humanity's soul made manifest, forged not from metal but from the raw defiance of a species that refused to fade. And now, as its light dimmed, Elias felt its burden ease. It had done what it was created to do. The galaxy remembered humanity once more. He pressed his palm to the hilt and whispered, "Rest." The light flickered once, like a star winking out, and then the field fell silent. For weeks, the Terran fleet orbited Earth, sending aid and rebuilding what was lost. The cities that had fallen under alien bombardment began to breathe again. From shattered skyscrapers, survivors emerged: farmers, engineers, teachers, ordinary people who looked to the sky and saw ships bearing their own flag for the first time in generations. For them, Elias Ward was not a myth or soldier. He was the farmer who fought for his land, who stood when the world fell. The stories spread through every channel, carried by traders and diplomats, until his name became legend: the Farmer of Earth, the Guardian of the Blade. But legends rarely rest quietly. Deep within the halls of the Galactic Council, chaos ruled. The Chancellor had been overthrown, replaced by those demanding peace with the returning Terrans. Yet others whispered of vengeance, of new alliances to contain humanity's rise before it was too late. And far in the outer sectors, the surviving Draxians rebuilt their armies, vowing to return. Still, fear lingered more than fury. They had seen what one human could do with a relic. They had seen what an awakened humanity looked like. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. One evening, as twilight painted the farm in pale silver light, a shadow descended from the sky. A small craft, sleek and silent, landed near the ruins of Elias's barn. From it stepped a woman cloaked in gray, Ambassador Lyra Vane. She approached him slowly, her eyes filled with wonder and something like sorrow. "You are the one who started it," she said softly. "The signal that shook the stars." Elias gave a faint smile, weary but kind. "No, I only reminded them we were still here." Lyra glanced toward the blade, half buried in the soil, its surface now dull and still. "The Council fears it," she said. "They say it cannot be destroyed." Elias nodded. "That's because it was never built to kill. It was built to remember." For a long moment, they stood in silence as the wind whispered through the charred wheat stalks. "What will you do now?" she asked finally. Elias looked toward the horizon, where dawn was breaking once again. "What humans have always done," he said. "We plant again." Years passed. The Terran Alliance grew stronger, uniting old colonies and lost worlds under one banner. Trade returned, peace settled, and for a time, the galaxy held its breath in uneasy harmony. But in the quiet corners of the universe, stories still spread. Stories of a farmer with a blade of light who faced an army alone, and of the day the stars themselves bent to humanity's will. Children on distant worlds grew up hearing his name, whispering it with awe: Elias Ward, the man who brought Earth back to life. And yet, somewhere in the forgotten fields of his farm, buried deep beneath the soil, the echo blade slept once more, its hum faint but eternal. Sometimes, when the night was still and the stars burned bright, travelers swore they could see a faint blue light flicker from the ground, pulsing like a heartbeat, slow, patient, alive. The galaxy moved on, but the legend remained, etched into the cosmos like a scar and a promise. Humanity, reborn from silence, watched the stars not with fear, but with quiet determination. They knew the truth now, the one Elias had always known. The greatest power was not in the weapon, nor in the war, but in the will to stand, to rise, to rebuild, and to remember. And so, the last harvest came, not of crops or conquest, but of legacy. Humanity had sown silence and reaped fear, planted defiance and grown unity. The stars that once scorned Earth now shone with cautious reverence. Somewhere beyond them, perhaps in another forgotten field on another distant world, the blade waited, patient as always, for the day when humanity would need to remind the universe again who they truly were. Outro. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Tales, where humanity always finds a way to rise again.